In his great poem, The Second Coming, W.B. Yeats describes a cataclysm of what happens when the falcon cannot see the falconer. Cut loose from its source, its hold, it flies off into chaos. He could have been describing these times when ecological, economic and political challenges send us spinning off into extremism or indifference, when we have lost a sense individually and collectively of a centre which holds. We're being taught, if we look, to see where a real centre that holds is available to us. The eye of the soul sees such as crises as what they are, a spiritual crisis, a loss of centeredness, groundedness in something certain and loving, without which all manner of conscious and unconscious fears spin us off into atomization, disorder and disconnection. What is the centre that holds? Why is this happening? What do I do? Where indeed, if any, is a God? These are everyday questions that surface at times in the wasteland of spiritual aridity. Arguably the more important question is, who asks the question? Through deeper inquiry we begin to realise that who we think we are is not necessarily who we really are. That is where we must start. All spiritual traditions nudge us into questioning assumptions about what it is to be me. Our level of awareness of me determines the way we are in the world. Between the shores of the ego and the ocean of the possibility of soul, there are many planes of consciousness. Thus, whatever we do in the world, we have to be clear not only about what we do, but who is doing it and why. Intention is all. Form follows consciousness. In the clarification of the motive through the ground of our beseeching, to paraphrase T.S. Eliot, we're more likely to produce wholesome actions if they come from the wholesomeness of our essence, our soul, as opposed to, say, the product of ego attachments and agendas. Inner awakening to deeper truth of self must precede the forms we create. In a culture where we should be in charge, make things happen and succeed, surrender into other perceptions of self is anathema. When we act from the plane of ego consciousness, we stamp our will, however benevolently intended, upon the world. Things we want to change are contaminated and corrupted by our desire to fix people and things according to our image. When we let go of doing our will and serve the will, the results are very different. But discerning the difference between the two, there's the rub. Much of modern culture has subtly and sometimes not so subtly bought into the values of neoliberalism. With its roots in Nietzschean Übermenschen and Gott ist tot, 20th century eugenics and Darwinian survival of the fittest, this ideology has permeated almost every level of our thinking and actions and has rippled through political discourse, from the economics of Hayek and the ideologies of Ayn Rand and outwards into Thatcherism, Reaganism and many recent populist movements and demagogues. It's a fundamental denial of the truth that we are not just human beings, but also human belongings. It feeds rampant individualism, colonizes our values as irrefutable givens, and infects every part of our culture. It denies the truth that we are at our best when connected, collaborative and cooperative, living lives in community of shared responsibility. This worldview has crept into the spiritual life. For example, many organizations have set up mindfulness programs for staff in an effort to reduce sickness, absenteeism, burnout and attrition. Like motherhood and apple pie, building awareness, resilience and opening us up to greater compassion through mindfulness would seem self-evidently good. So what's to complain about? First of all, the implementation of some mindfulness programs buys into the zeitgeist that it's all down to you, that whatever is going wrong in society, personal life and work is the result of your own moral, biological, psychological or spiritual weaknesses that, with a bit of mindful work, you can put right. If you can't, it's your fault. Thus, stressed people get asked what's wrong with you rather than what's wrong with the circumstances that have made you stressed. Lonely people get asked why can't you make friends rather than what's going on that has atomized your neighborliness. Impoverished people get asked why don't you get a job rather than Why have so many jobs become an insecure drudge paying shit wages? Responsibilities and costs of making sure the workplace or society is a healthy place to be get bypassed if we can dump the problem on individual failings. Many of the resilience-building mindfulness website and self-help tools are breathtaking in their lack of attention to the responsibilities of employers, governments and societies. Despite the efforts to secularize it, can mindfulness really be divorced from its underlying Buddhist philosophy, not least what mind is? Is a profound spiritual practice debased if reduced to a stress reduction technique? I was at a meeting some years ago with the Dalai Lama. He said, "Why do you all want to learn Buddhism? You have all you need already here." The rich tradition of the contemplative way, for example, rooted in 2,000 years of Christian history, with the same attendant health benefits and cultivation of loving awareness, is already here. The different philosophical roots of this tradition also hold the possibility that there is something other available to help us. We are not on our own. The Buddha said, "Suffering is," and that its roots were attachment to things or to persons or to ideas of self. Another perspective is possible, that suffering occurs only on one plane of consciousness and that it may have meaning and purpose. Thus, attachment may not be the issue, rather detachment from our source, our deepest self. Reconnection with this offers a different perspective and set of responses to the challenge of what it is to be human. At the Sacred Space Foundation, our approach rests on what we have called heartfulness, an awakening to full awareness through inner exploration, going down deep into the heart and not just up into the head. It enables people to let go of trying to do compassion and simply learn to be it, for we carry its infinite source already within the very heart of our being. Can it be possible that integrating deep spiritual practice, spirituality, into the workplace and wider society could assist the emergence of greater compassion? Spiritual practices and insights do not have to be segregated to the meditation room, the retreat, or the religious house. Personal transformation invariably requires processes such as inner inquiry over a long term and deep shaking of the tectonic plates of the psyche in order to unleash the real I am from the I that I think I am. Such liberation is not about personal gratification, pacification, or creating a saccharine, fluffy, feel-good existence. Rather, the intention is to nurture an interior realization and fulfillment that liberates us into deeper engagement with life and work, but from a place of profound awareness of our true nature. An awareness that is not detached, disengaged, aloof witnessing of the human condition, but bursts with compassion for the healing of it and inspires a healthy, boundaried, non-attached willingness to participate. It is a call to leave the self and come home to the self, from which our path of service arises, awaiting the heart to revolutionary, compassionate action in the swampy lowlands of ordinary reality. In the words of the prophet Micah, to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with God, whatever we experience the latter to be. This demands nothing less than transformation out of limited perceptions of self and the story of life as currently lived. On this basis, Descartes' famous dictum, "I think, therefore I am," is subverted. When we break through the limited perception that thinking defines our nature, perhaps this could be better expressed as, "I am, therefore I think." This requires the writing of a new story, where we are the hand and the pen and the paper. In the words of T.S. Eliot again, it requires a condition of complete simplicity, costing not less than everything. This, to many, perhaps most, is scary stuff. Little wonder we have lots of drugs to keep us away from it and addicted. Not long ago, a police raid in Toronto netted 42 kilograms of carfentanil. A powerful opioid, it normally is used to knock out elephants, but when mixed with heroin delivers a knockout but deadly high for people. Half a world away, it was also Singles Day in China. The online shopping giant Alibaba saw over 160 billion yuan, that's about 20 billion pounds, ka-ching through its tills in the biggest one-day shopping spree on the planet. All this at the same time when world levels of mental illness, drug abuse, gang violence and extremist politics are all on the rise. All these events are connected. Sartre wrote of the God-shaped hole in our consciousness, an empty space longing to be fulfilled with meaning, purpose and connection, the very stuff of spirituality and what it is to be human. For millennia and across cultures, gods or goddesses quench the spiritual thirst in various forms. In a life uprooted from what Tillich called the ground of being, locked into ordinary reality without connection to something other, we seek other gods, like drugs, to fill the void. Few of them are healthy: drink, drugs, TV, sex, shopping, power grabbing, career chasing, clothes, status seeking. All these painkillers and more offer only temporary respite. Like the insatiable hungry ghosts of the Buddhist tradition with their bloated bodies and tiny mouths, they demand more and more. All are ultimately destructive to ourselves and the earth. The fearful undercurrent lurking in us as we touch that emptiness within, bereft of the numinous, the centre which holds, makes us sick. It drives a relentless anxiety in the human condition that, for example, compromises our immune system. We're more likely to develop one or more of a whole raft of illnesses, from cardiovascular disease to cancer. It's no accident, therefore, that fear is diminished and thus our health and happiness improved when we have 4 other F's in our lives. On all scales and from the big picture of much recent research, we're more likely to be happy and healthy if we have, firstly, faith, not necessarily in God, but simply having faith in something that gives a centre and meaning to life. For most people it is some perception of the divine, but while some place it in politics, philosophy, or for that matter sport, although the transient nature of these is problematic, for we seek a solid, unchanging and loving centre that these cannot necessarily provide. Secondly, fellowship, family, friends, community, relationships that shelter us from loneliness. Loneliness has been shown to undermine health, although it may be not so much the loneliness per se as the underlying anxiety it provokes. And thirdly, fulfilling work, with a sense of control over decisions that affect us, companionship and offering meaning, purpose and rewards to life. And lastly, free giving, volunteering, parenting, opportunities to help and express compassion without expectation of reward. Our programs at Sacred Space, going back more than 3 decades, grew out of both the scientific and spiritual truths of the consequences of disconnection from each other and ourselves and our source. The early teachings we pursued in the healing arts extended to support for healthcare and other staff, as we noticed that our course participants sought more than skills in healing and how to change their organisations or dealing with staffing problems. They wanted, often desperately, healing for themselves. Out of that, our Heartfulness ideas grew. The approach is twofold. Firstly, through the inner work of uncovering the reality of who I am and letting go of addictions to various identities, false ego identities. This draws on approaches such as spiritual direction, mentoring, deep silence, guided imagery, reflection, enneagram insights, labyrinth walking, meditation, and so on. The other approach is to deepen that connection with our source, the absolute, the beloved, God, whatever we perceive that to be. When we begin to engage with the dismantling of who I think I am, to discover the I am, that letting go of attachments to roles and identities can be confusing and hurtful. Confronting the essential emptiness of personality can take us to the edge of the abyss. If I'm not this, doctor, nurse, mother, friend, sister, filmmaker, taxpayer, then who am I? Nothing? Contemplative practices help people from fear to liberation in I am. Full stop. No accretions needed. I am is sufficient. There is joy in the realization that being nothing and no thing are not the same. Let me tell you about one retreat participant. She arrived armed with her multi-packs of cola and stashes of chocolate and ciggies. Her bad education, crushed and angry persona, dysfunctional upbringing and home life was soon revealed and she spent the first part of the retreat barely able to stay in the room. However, she stuck with it. In the final session, everyone was speaking of their revelations, of the impact of discovering, taking the cover off, their I amness. She explained, well, if you're I am and I'm I am, then basically we're all the same, aren't we? Recognizing our mutual I amness is the stuff of connection and the fount of compassion in action. The next logical step from this is to discover the great I am. When Moses goes up the mountain to meet God and asks God, who are you? The response from the divine is very simple. I am who I am. If the beloved, the absolute, is I am, and each of us is I am, we are all one. Here is the center which holds the I am, the eternal, the personal and the transpersonal, not the transient and the worldly. Only here is a knowing and the relating of the deepest self, the center that holds. It is the kingdom or the queendom within. To make this connection to self and the deepest self is what we are called to do. As E.M. Forster in the novel Howard's End reminds us, only connect with the essence of who we really are, and through that connect with others and the absolute and the all that is, whatever we experience that to be. That is the truth that sets us free, free of ego needs. It is where human love will be seen at its height. It is the center that holds no matter what transpires in time and space, in ordinary reality. This connection is not somewhere else, it is here, now, always. In The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy cries out, I want to go home. But you are home, Dorothy, replies the good witch. All you have to do is wake up.